Moneylife Foundation is a 12-year-old non-profit organization, primarily engaged in spreading financial literacy and advocacy for savers. We also make efforts to spread awareness on various issues that are of the interest of the consumers. We keep buying packaged products for consumption all the time. However, more than 99% of the times, we do not read what is written on the label of the product. At the most, we check the expiry date, especially for the food products on the label. Same applies for cosmetics as well. While the large print promise benefits, the fine print on the labels often hide toxic chemicals that are harmful to our skin. Proper reading and understanding of the product labels can improve your life and health in a big way. To help us decipher the gimmick behind product labels, especially on cosmetics, we have with us Geeta Prakash, founder and CEO of Parama Naturals. She is an electrical engineer and holds a management degree from IIM. Her career spans 2.5 decades of diverse experience at Thermax, the Tata Administrative Service, Tata Motors, and their family venture, Satvayur Extracts Limited. She is also on the advisory board of IIM Udaipur and a couple of startups in education and sustainable energy solutions. Passionate about holistic wellness, experiential learning, and sustainability, she is attempting to bring back benefits of ancient traditions for today's busy lives, with a range of natural daily essentials for skin care and wellness with Parama Naturals. Before I hand it over to Geeta ma'am, allow me to share some basic ground rules for today's webinar. We have kept all of you on mute during the session for the benefit of all involved. We will only unmute you during the question and answer session. For optimal viewing, we suggest you to keep the webinar on speaker view mode on Zoom. This meeting is being recorded and shall be uploaded on our YouTube channel, that is youtube.com/MoneyLifeTV. During the question and answer, please use the raise hands button available on Zoom if you wish to ask any question. Also, a sincere request to please keep your questions limited to under 90 seconds. Please feel free to use the chat session to share your comments, questions, and observations. However, we urge you to use the common chat room and not send us private messages, which we may not be able to monitor and reply while the webinar is going on. Also, please note that your cameras may be on by default and you could be broadcasting your background and homes for everyone to see. On Zoom, you may wish to keep your cameras off to maintain your privacy, and we request that you do so now. Now, without taking more of your time, may I request Geeta ma'am to take over?
So thanks, everyone. I think we can start with the main presentation straight away. And then we can, because most of what I have to say will be dovetailed. But at the outset, thanks so much, Moneylife Foundation. Thank you, Sucheta. Thank you, Devashish, for presenting this wonderful opportunity of the consumers to get aware about these aspects. We can start with the presentation straight away. Hi, everyone. Good evening. So today's talk, as they talked to you about, was about demystifying skincare and cosmetic labels. Did you ever realize that your dressing table or your bathroom closet could have several time bombs sitting in there? At a medical conference in Graz, which I attended in 2015, some doctors presented about the rising number of cancer cases because of leave-on cosmetics. And this was based on their study in France and Germany, which were the birthplaces of modern cosmetics and perfumery. Germany and France and the rest of Europe, where the stringency norms for cosmetics and labels are actually the highest. So this was something which was really a moment to pause and ponder upon. And let's think about it. What were they talking about? They talked about stay on cosmetics. So what are they? The common association that we have with the word cosmetics is actually color cosmetics. And therefore, it gets associated with women, with the lipsticks, with the eyeliners or the blushes. In fact, in most times in India, and especially the previous generation, cosmetics was almost considered to be a negative connotation, had a negative connotation because it meant that you're put on or you're beauty conscious or you're being superficial. However, as per the FDA guidelines, A cosmetic is anything that is applied on the skin. It is applied on our body, but not ingested. And therefore, it covers everything about oral care, about skin care, about hair care. All of these are cosmetics. So your simple daily moisturizing cream, or your sunscreen, or your baby lotion, your aftershave, your age-defying serums, your deos, your antiperspirants, hair gels are all stay-on cosmetics that were indicated in the report. Cosmetics that destroy. They do not discriminate any gender. And therefore, this talk is really for everyone over here. Because most of us tend to use at least one of these or more in our daily lives. The bottles just look so nice sitting there on our shelves. They make you feel great too, the nice perfume, the good feel. You can never, ever imagine that something that looks so neatly presented in a bottle can actually be harmful or unsafe, let alone be a time bomb. And the ones that actually are the most harmless are the ones like our common daily use ones, like moisturizers, because they are like slow poison. And why? Because we use them daily throughout the year, all over our body. From the time, in fact, that we are very young, right? From the time that babies move on from baby oils to moisturizers. Because, and why? Why are they such a problem? I'll give you an example. When you apply a moisturizer, have you ever noticed on your skin, there's a little whiteness? It's not necessarily because of the white color of the moisturizer that it might be, but it's basically because of a surfactant or emulsifier, which is a detergent. It upsets the pH balance of your skin because the skin, which is supposed to be mildly acidic, now becomes mildly alkaline. And this constant change in the pH balance of the skin can lead to rashes. Rashes in the short term, in fact, the rashes in the short term might be great because the moment you get a rash, you might stop using it. But if you don't have a rash and you continue using it, what happens? It actually percolates down 24/7, drop by drop, even if it's diluted, and keeps adding to the toxic load of the body. And as it is, the toxic load is probably quite high because of the environment, the foods that we eat. These are many of these things are unavoidable, right? So when it comes to this last straw, it is quite something. So all these aspects were corroborated in a study by the Environment Working Group, which is a not-for-profit organization with over 30 million researchers, that an average woman uses 12 to 16 products each day, exposing her to more than 200 different chemicals on a daily basis. And this exposure accumulates over time. In fact, as a generation, we consume more packaged foods and personal care products than anyone before us did. Hardly do we ever stop to read the labels of these products. Maybe sometimes we do look at foods at least, but we hardly ever look at skincare labels. So in the short term, we have things like allergies, rashes. In the long term, there are very, very serious concerns. It can be hormonal disruptions. In fact, there were some studies which talked about the cases of PCOS and PCOD being linked back to things like parabens and leading to the hormonal dysfunctionality of girls within the ages of 18 to 23. Then there are 1 out of 5 chemicals which have been linked to cancer. And these are when the issue really becomes very frightening. Okay. So, but why do I feel so strongly about this? Because I think I have lived this life of being at the receiving end. That is, very often, unless a personal experience or a life situation forces us to make a conscious choice, we don't really do. And that is what happened. So let me share with you about how I started reading labels and what transpired after that. As he mentioned that, by training, I'm an engineer and a business management professional. And I've been working in the corporate sector for over a decade. But as a working professional and later as a homemaker too, I found that I had barely any time between juggling work, and home, and subsequently later as with the kid, I found that I was, had just about 2 minutes of time to spend on self-care. Very often it was while I was driving a car or between meetings, sometimes even in the local train in Bombay. And like most people, I too was enamored by the products that promise beauty, and I had a desire to experiment with them. So if you just close your eyes and remember the jingles that you heard on the radio, on air, on TV, the pretty girl or the handsome guy that you wanted to look like if you use them. It sounds silly, but it happens to the best of us, because I believe that a brand that is reputed, and that is what I've always believed in, was a brand that was safe. And so over the years, I bought several brands from leading Indian manufacturers, brands from foreign brands. I found at that point in time, I had no idea about these problems. Okay. All I had was that I was sensitive to smells and fragrances. So sometimes I would get headaches. So sometimes these products would just lie there unutilized in the cupboards. I was quite a devout follower of, a brand which my grandfather introduced me to, which he used to go overseas every time and would bring back these jars. And apart from that, and so these are kind of safe spaces, right? I didn't bother to read labels except of foods, which I did during pregnancy, and that too was because of my gestational diabetes. And probably I just wanted to make sure that there is nothing which seems to be a crazy carcinogen or a known carcinogen like Ajinomoto or something like that. So, and because I didn't want it to cross the fetal border. But later on, I started reading skincare labels after my baby was born. And when she had allergic reactions to something that you consider as safe as baby oil. And when I realized that she broke out into a rash, I looked at the label. It had mineral oil written on it. And I thought maybe that's what the problem is. So I went back to using the home nuskas, which is of the mustard oil, the olive oil, the almond oil, etc., which were well known and ancient traditions. But a little while later, again, because how long can you keep applying oils in your baby? So I went to a moisturizer, a natural moisturizer by a very well known Indian brand, and also I tried one from a foreign brand. And I realized that she still broke out into rash. And it was actually frustrating at that point in time, because here you are trying to now get released from this whole thing of baby malish and, getting on with your life and getting back to your professional career. But I found that she was now breaking out into rashes with even these so-called good brands. And I started reading the labels then. And despite being an engineer, I found that there were so many names on that label which I just could not recognize. I think even unless you're a chemistry graduate, it's very difficult to know them now, even after so many years. But now, anyway, I had become quite passionate about holistic healing and natural therapies, because she'd also had asthma before that, and delving into some Indian traditions and aromatherapy and things like that. And I wanted to try and use a time-tested ingredient for one of the problems which I had, which was I had some boils on my leg. So I applied a neem oil on my leg, and it was a really, really strange experience. During this space of few days that I was applying this neem oil on my leg, I would find that within a few moments of me having applied it, I could actually taste neem oil on my lips. And the first few times I had to, I thought this is, ridiculous. Maybe I've touched my fingers to my lips. So I dispensed with the thought. But it was unmistakable after 3, 4, 5 times. And this correlation took me straight to trying to do some research to figure out how this was actually possible. And that's when I realized the skin not only reacts to what is applied on it, but it actually absorbs everything that we apply on it. As long as the molecule is small enough, it penetrates deeper and deeper and deeper. And in hindsight, this was not surprising at all, because we all have probably heard about nicotine patches or patches that are applied on the arms for heart health. But I wondered, why does it not happen when we apply nice lotions and creams which we buy? How come we don't test those ingredients? Because after all, they smell nice. And we know from our organoleptic profile that if something smells nice, very often it also tastes nice. I mean, except if it's a perfume. But anyway, I realized that the ingredients probably which were there in the products that we used were these colorless, odorless, tasteless chemicals, which we probably remember from our chemistry experiments back in school. And I suddenly had this very crazy vision of little chemical cells and monsters which were entering my body. Today, of course, we can see the COVID monster everywhere. But at that point in time, I felt that there were these little things which were coursing through my blood, and I seemed to have no control. And that is when I started looking at labels very carefully. But this whole journey from being a totally devout follower of a brand, moving to maybe where I would just check for critical ingredients, to then trying to look at little more on the labels, and then finally trying to learn how to master them. I went through this long journey. And this long journey was really, really confusing. And after so many years of trying to fathom what is there in the labels, I think it is still extremely, extremely confusing. Because what do the terms mean on the label? What is AHA and what are retinoids? And there are these big terms and there are these small terms. There are the fine labels and there are the big screaming messages right up on top. Probably if you think back, many of you might also have had similar experiences. Some may be extreme, some may not be so extreme. But for example, I had a friend whose skin would get red when she applied a sunscreen. Another friend whose lips bloated up when she applied a lipstick. But should we wait for these experiences and till we get this kind of an epiphany and then have to really stop? But as I said, when I was looking back at this whole journey of how I moved from one stage to another, I realized that I myself have been so guilty, not just of consuming products myself, but of even buying things and gifting to others, because they were always so well packaged. They look pretty as gifts, and they were so convenient when you go to the mall or you go to a duty free. It's very, very easy to pick them up. In hindsight, I think I feel blessed that I had these experiences, because in time, maybe I could look at saving myself. Maybe I could leave a legacy for my daughter and hope to be able to spread some of these messages and experiences for the benefit of people like me who need pure yet convenient products, for people who need definitely a safe space, for people who need therapeutics, because clean and conscious beauty is really a conduit to long-term good health and wealth and happiness. And that wellness, I think, is extremely important. And so here I am trying to extend this knowledge to others. And this was corroborated by a professor who teaches cosmetology in the Johns Hopkins University in the US, that whatever we put on ourselves affects our body. It affects us internally and externally. And so finally, I realized that the skin really eats everything too. And that this has now dictated not just the personal care choices that I make, but also everything else that I'm now trying to do is based on this premise. So I'm trying to give in a short capsule, some basics about, like a REM session, some basics about how to really go about labels, some of my own experiences, some of you may already know, and go beyond. So what do the labels say? And there are these large 10 things which really come on to every label, right? They are the large luring front label. They promise the beautification, these are what they call as the benefits. But they talk about the ingredients, There is the brand name, which is well known. Then there is the back label, which is extremely, extremely confusing. There's very, very fine print, and there are lots of numbers sometimes. Sometimes the fine print just looks as though it's discouraging you to read them. These complex sounding chemical names, which, as I said, even if you're a chemistry graduate, it's really difficult to know. Some botanical sounding names, they do give some semblance of a feeling of comfort. There is something natural in this. But what really happens, what we don't really know is, are these really natural or are they chemicals? For example, a name like limonene sounds like lemon, right? But it's actually a chemical derivation from, it's a chemically derived product which smells of lemon. So we don't really know. And in some cases, you can have an extract which will have so much percentage of natural limonene, but normally the label then would say a natural extract, but it's still confusing. Then there are these vague terms which say natural, Ayurvedic. Why do I say vague names? They obviously seem, if it's natural, it's natural. If it's Ayurvedic, it's Ayurvedic. But no, the rules are such that if you have even a natural ingredient in your product, you can say natural. If you have even an Ayurvedic ingredient in your product, you can say Ayurvedic. It's unfortunate, but it's true. For example, a very well-known brand has so much percentage of turmeric extract in it. There is some amount of sandalwood oil in it, but the rest of it says excipient, QS, quantum satin, gel base, cream base, oil base. What does it really mean? What is there in that base? In one study that we found, we were trying to explore getting some aloe vera gel. And what we found in that aloe vera gel in this cosmetic manufacturing facility, we found that in a bottle of gel, of aloe vera gel, there's actually only some 10% aloe vera juice. And the balance is something called a gel base, which is a chemical. And in that chemical, there were all these little bubbles, which made it look like a very natural aloe vera thing. And then he showed me how they put this little color in it, little mild green color, to give it a very natural looking look. So it looks as though you've freshly extracted this aloe vera pulp and it's just gone straight into the bottle. So when you even see words like this, it's only when you get behind that I started discovering many of these things much later. But anyway, so then there is, of course, this comforting word called aqua, because aqua is water. So it says, okay, water can't be wrong, right? Then there are these key ingredients, which they hardly ever show 100% and hardly ever show individual ingredients. In fact, as a manufacturer, when we're trying to see, most people do not look at giving these ingredients because things can be so easily copied. In a world where everybody is trying to preserve their IP, you don't want your recipe known out to the market because it's so easy to copy, right? So, in fact, this was something, while one is supposed to indicate at least all the ingredients as per some laws, but you will never know how much, because those, and I'll come to that later. And the last but not the least, there are always these best before and use before things. So there is, of course, a date before the expiry ends. And then there is a date for use within so much of a time after opening. Now, why are these important? It also indicates, or it can also indicate, what is the level of preservatives that are there in the product. So I'm going to go through 3 caselets with you, specific caselets, so that this is something that you will be able to observe on your own. Okay, so we talked about the large print and we talked about the small print. So for example, we take the case of a daily moisturizer. Okay, and on top, this is a famous brand name known for more than 100 years. It says nourishing, caring, the ad scream out. The messages, if you go in for additional details, it says good for diaper rash too. So therefore, it's obviously safe for babies. What are the top three ingredients? Aqua or water, Paraffinum liquidum, mineral oil, which is actually a petrochemical. It just says paraffin liquidum. And then there is C1519 alkane, which is a solvent. And then if you go down the list, and in most products, there are more than 50 to 60 ingredients that you need to read. So if you're looking for, yes, this is parabens free. So you quickly look for, does it have parabens? You probably don't even bother to look at any other part of that label, because when you're looking for something, that's what you find. In fact, some social experiments talk that if you're going you're driving in your car and you're going from place A to place B, and somebody tells you to look for red signboards, but after you reach there, they ask you how many blue signboards were there. And you realize that you were not looking for the blue signboards because you were just looking for the reds. So how is it, or why is it dangerous? So as per the study by the EWG, this paraffin or paraffin liquidum is a human immune and respiratory toxicant or allergen. Now it might seem small because allergen just, normally we kind of dismiss an allergen. But again, through some various other studies, continuous exposure to allergens leads to inflammation in the body. And continued inflammation in the body can lead to many more serious problems. It can lead to liver dysfunctions. It can lead to even cancer. Let's go down C15 to 19, alkane, which is supposed to be not allowed if it is through repeated exposure and was banned or found unsafe. But this is there in a baby product. Methyl paraben, which I mentioned to you, parabens were also known for being hormone disruptors, is a no-no, a strict no-no. The next example is a face cream. And, with mild changes, there may be some mild changes here or there, but typically, again, this is a large brand name known for more than 150 years. It's supposed to be a brightening, matte finish, daily light moisturizing. Top three ingredients, again, are water, palmitic acid, and ethyl hexyl methoxycinnamate. I'm sorry, even I find it difficult to pronounce it. And of course, then there is the methyl paraben. And then, as I told you, like limonene and citronella. And we come back to hormone disruptors. We come back to irritants, immune system. And then I looked at a body oil, because if you're looking at, creams and lotions, let's look at a face and body oil. This is again a very, very large brand name, and it actually, the brand name itself has a natural tone to it. So the side, it is also supposed to be safe for pregnancy. And again, here the top three ingredients were paraffin and trilosonanoin and, whatever. And then there are known culprits, which are retinol palmitate, and I'll come to that later, which is supposed to be like a retinoid. And with exposure to UV rays of the sunlight, this retinoid is supposed to lead to toxicity, which can release free radicals and therefore can become carcinogenic. But you'd wonder, how is all of this allowed? Is this really even legal? How can they put all this? But the Indian FDA label system allows large print. That large print, they just needed to have the common name. The rest of the claims that you make can be obfuscated, because you may not have the claim on the label, but you can have this claim coming to you through several other ways. Somebody talks about it as an advertisement. Somebody talks about as a referral. And if that is repeated, obviously, frequently enough, that claim gets set in. Or you can put a disclaimer. This was based on the studies done by so many people across this. And that's always in the fine print again. As regards the ingredients, because that is where the list is really long, they only talk about that if the ingredient is more than 1%, it should be in descending order. That's all that they say. If it's less than 1%, it could actually be in any order. And in fact, if it's a very small size, it's not even required to be listed at all. And in fact, it was not very surprising. when we were looking at turmeric-based products, we found a product which claimed, it's again a famous brand name, which claimed that it was a turmeric face wash. And that turmeric product had something like 200 parts per million. And when we talk about it being effective, let's say if turmeric has to be effective, we're talking about to the levels of at least 10 to 15 to 20,000 parts per million is what it would then be effective at. So why did I actually cover those three products? Those three products were products that are actually used, again, as I said, by everyone in any family. You know, it's used throughout the year, these products, whether you use it for dryness in winter, whether you use it just for regular moisturizing, because we're all nowadays used to sitting in AC environments, which are quite drying for the skin. We're used to using them in just our daily lifestyle, you know, using sunscreens. And since sunscreen is more like a moisturizer with something else added to it. And these so-called emollients are, you know, are typically this water, because we saw aqua with some oil and some chemicals. And these things are not even seen because we don't even know in the fine print. And that is why, and a cream is actually just like a moisturizer, but just thicker, right? And so the sum and substance of all of this is this: the large print giveth and the small print taketh away. But despite all the studying, I still cannot claim to be very well informed, but never mind. So because of all that, I just realized that nobody can really master 12,000 ingredients which are there in cosmetics. I just have decided to play it really safe. So in all of this, obviously these 50 to 60 ingredients, the fine print, the large print, all of this, it's so confusing, right? And there is a term in finance which is called confusopoly, but applying it here too, because ultimately so is all of this, is how do you wade through it all? How do you find your way out? Because as a business person, you want to lure your customer. You want that customer to buy. You have to have a catch. You need to have the celebrity. You need to have those nice claims. And the more aspects that you talk about in the product, that the collagen boosting or the elastin repairing or something or the other, it makes a person feel like, wow, this is something doing really good for me, right? This is something I didn't know. You think about it, you research it out, you see that collagen is something that is there, which if you have something collagen boosting, it will make your skin feel really good, right? But it really has a problem because ultimately you still have to wait as a consumer. So there are two sides to it. So unless we know what we really want and why we want it, we won't be able to navigate out of this confusopoly. So that's my earnest request, that knowledge is power. And in this short session, it's very difficult for me to cover most points, but please go out there and get to know about what it is. So the common terms is, the focus of this is that the topmost layer, which is our epidermis, is the focus of all the cosmetics. The collagen and the elastin are slightly lower level. And these are the ones which are more responsible for the wrinkles and the aging. But as you can see, the percolation of ingredients happens through the skin. And because it's now a semi-permeable layer, this skin, which we think is actually a barrier protecting us, is something which is also absorbing everything. So it is extremely important to take care of it. It is also very, very important to protect it. But what all ails our skin? And here I'll come to this. There are some things which are, of course, which are there in our lifestyle. And there are some things which are there on the surface. So let's just focus on what is there on the surface, which we can do, because apart from sleep management and water and good food and, managing your exercises, because believe it or not, if you sweat well, that also looks after your skin really well. So you need to figure out how much really the cosmetic is going to take care of. But a basic thing like dryness, skin dryness, which happens because of environment, winter, air conditioning, you do need a cosmetic. And in that area, cosmetic can help. Beyond that, then they become more like cosmeceuticals, where there are active ingredients and they need to be time tested and really looked at whether they're going to be working on your collagen or elastin, etc., or your blemishes or acne. And what were cosmetics? Because at the core, cosmetology is as old as the hills. Everybody likes to look good, and it's been core to human nature and our behavior. In fact, we're so often judged by the way that we look and how we smell. And it's been true from time immemorial. So as Indians, we've had rich ancient traditions of Ayurveda. And through Ayurveda, or now many other like traditional Chinese medicine, aromatherapy, many people are coming out with, at least we are getting to read much more. But since I'm more familiar with Ayurveda, I'll just briefly talk about this. That in fact, in Kaya Chikitsa and Dinacharya, which is the daily regimen which was talked about in Ayurveda, there was oil application, and it was meant to be, so the oils with herbs, powders, or paste, they were meant to work as cosmetics for prevention, for moisturizing, for cleansing, for exfoliation, toning, beautification, therapeutics, everything. Okay. And over a period of time, and especially probably because with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, chemicals coming in, you could replace naturals with chemical ingredients because they were much lower in cost. You could replace, you needed to have now larger numbers because, small artisanal products were losing out. Large companies could come in. So you need preservation. Then there was a need for mass distribution. You wanted to have longevity on the shelf. And there were some good things in the chemical technologies, etc., which came in too, because they really helped people overcome some problems which they could not deal with. And definitely, as more and more people work, they had lesser time, busy lives. You wanted to make sure that you could get the benefits of those chemicals and not have long procedures because you don't have time for that kind of skincare. But by and large, modern day cosmetics are really, as I talked about, from those oils and herbs. Now it is a combination of oils and herbs, or at least herb extracts. The herb extracts have moved to chemicals, but let's just keep that as a packet. But it's an emulsion really of a liquid and something solid, or an oil and water, which goes into most of these products. And the reason I'm trying to demystify this, because the variation of this just depends on how long you want the moisturizing effect, or whether you have oily skin or dry skin, or combination skin, whether you want it for winter or for summer, things like that. So moisturizer, as I said, is typically a 5 or 10% oil, is about 60 to 70% water, and the balance 25 to 30% is chemicals. Chemicals for emulsification, for stabilization, for preservation, for the perfume, the soft fragrance that you want to have, for the nice color if you want white or light pink, or a light blue for that matter. And so that is what, by and large, and in case there's some active ingredients, sometimes it could be for a sunscreen, you'd be adding something, or if it's for collagen boosting, you'd add something else. And the same thing goes on with serum. Sometimes it can maybe an oil-based serum. It could be a water or non-oil-based serum. When I say water or water equivalent. So what are the cosmetic ingredients? There are, the world, as I said, is very large, but if I were to divide into just 4, typically 2x2 matrix, we have the time tested and the non-time tested ingredients, and then there are ingredients which are good for us and the bad for us. And while the list is really, really long, but in short, there are I see unknown ingredients. For example, the known ingredient, let's take a known ingredient like parabens. Today, it's a known ingredient. It was discovered way back in 1930s. It started becoming a bad ingredient only from 2000 plus. The moment it became a bad ingredient, some advanced companies started working on finding a replacement for parabens. And then with a slight molecule change, it became something else. But And then probably are we going to now wait for so many more years to discover when that will it continue to be a good ingredient, or will it become a bad ingredient later? So there are this whole thing, and sometimes there are fads like retinoids and retinol palmitate, which I talked about. And then there are the age-old, time-tested stars. They could be cold-pressed oils, turmeric. Then there are, even herbal extracts, because in our aromatherapy, there are many essential oils which are supposed to be very, very good. And then there are the most wanted known culprits. And I won't get into this, but because this is a very long list, and you can definitely get into reading about these. There are some very good sites that we can share. But there is one which I want to talk about. And this is something called Formaldehyde Releases. So this is supposed to be a carcinogen, but it does not come on as a formaldehyde being shown on the label. It may show as urea, which we use actually as a fertilizer, but it is there in all lotions and gels and serums, anything which has water in it. Okay, and this becomes a carcinogen after it goes fed into the bottle and on your skin. So there's just one thing which I wanted to say about those culprits, and one of the reports by EWG said that there were 12,000 ingredients that they researched. That there were in cosmetics. They researched some 2,400 ingredients. And out of those 2,400, they found 1,200 to be toxic. Can you imagine? So it's not feasible. I just wanted to say that it's really very difficult for you to find out, and there is a new one getting created. But let's look at the good news. And these time-tested ingredients, as I said, are the cold-pressed oils. And believe it or not, today modern science and modern research tells us that we can actually find fantastic benefits in them. Like coconut oil will have collagen boosting properties, or sesame oil is deep penetrating, and therefore it can actually work on deep scars inside. Almond oil smoothens the top of the skin. These different oils work at different levels, and there are many more in different genotypes or different civilizations which are common. I just focused on the ones which are time tested on the Indian skin. And the stars of all skincare is actually turmeric, which was India's ancient ingredient. And so I'd like to touch a little bit about that. Because, in our homes, if it was cut hoto haldi, burn hoto haldi, if you have acne haldi, and in fact, it was so nicely woven to all our rituals, whether it was the baby mundan, whether it was girls before puberty, whether it was before the shadi. In fact, in South India, I think most traditional homes, they would have a weekly bath with haldi and you'd find yellow color. But because now we have so much of time scarcity, nobody wants the bath and the stains. So we've gone to many chemicals replacing it. So how can turmeric really be incorporated into our cosmetics on a daily basis? You can, of course, use the powder in a haldi uptan. But these days, you also get very pure extracts of turmeric. And what we found is that some kinds of extracts, which are naturally extracted not through chemicals or solvents, but they have the active molecules which will penetrate deep down, which actually do the skin benefit in the turmeric, which are more the lipophilic or the oil-soluble molecules called terperones. And they penetrate right inside, and the different carrier oils will take it down with them to the part that needs working on. Because even in Ayurveda, it was, there are many, many things that turmeric can work on anti-aging, on skin clarifying, on making sure that the blemishes, the surface is much better off. And these things can be added not just to oils, but can be added even to a rose water. You can make your own cosmetic. Because when we tried doing experiments with this, we found the benefits. We found people whose skin started glowing with it. We found that there were no allergies. For my mother-in-law who had eczema on her skin, and that itchiness went away. And, turmeric is also just very soothing and calming. But the key question in some of these good stars, so while you see it on the label, you'll see turmeric or turmeric extract. But what is the percentage of that turmeric? What is the concentration of that turmeric? How has it been extracted? Those are things which are just not possible to see on the label. And that can come only through this awareness. And as I said, if life was perfect, we could have the benefits of them with what we have, the science of today. But you might say, okay, fine. So you've told all these things and the world out there is, so bad and terrible. What do we do? How should life progress? Because while for businesses it might be a good, and Auntie Grove said only the paranoid can survive, but for daily living, can we live in a paranoid manner all the time? Yes, we have to be careful. We have to be careful while crossing the road. The same way in some things you do have to be paranoid, but you can't be paranoid all the time. So you need to be able to find solutions for that. And so how do we address and change what we can? What we can't, we don't, but what we can, we should, right? So one of the most important takeaway as a consumer is any product that has aqua or water or deozorized water, try to make sure that you avoid it as far as possible. Because as I said, the moment you're adding water, it's a big problem. So how do you avoid aqua? So while the manufacturing company has added aqua in your bottle, instead of that, why don't you apply it directly in your skin? You take the pure oil yourself. You take the water separately and you apply directly on your skin. And how do you do that? Just after your bath, your body is naturally moist, or after a face wash. And worst case, you just put oil in your hand, you put a few drops of water, rub it, and just apply it on yourself. So what you've actually done, you've taken the good water and the good oils, and you've kept the chemicals out. And if you want some fragrance, you can add some essential oil. You can mix it instead of water. You can mix it with rose water. And the beauty is that you can actually, you can, based on the season, you can now have different concentrations for yourself. In summer, you can add a lot more water and a lot less oil. In winter, you can have a lot more oil and a lot less water, or maybe just pure oil, right? So you're actually, and believe it or not, this was a trick which I learned from my father, who at his age of 88 says he has been doing it for almost all his life. And in some ways, I felt really foolish. I said, how is it that we have dispensed with some of these basic tricks that people have done for all these years? The second one is choosing wisely and seeing products that are versatile. If every product has anywhere between 10 to 50 chemicals, can you somehow use one product instead of 2 or 3, so that at least you're limiting the exposure to your skin? Go for 100% transparent labels. It's very, very important for you to see words like no fillers, no hidden ingredients. Of course, you can say that, how do you trust it? But anyway, you can still probably manage that. You can see ingredients which are stars that you understand. And you can look at simple packaging, because ultimately the moment we have, more complex packaging, prettier looks, nicer labels, very often it's there to lure you. Okay. It's very often not necessarily there to reveal what is inside. And ultimately that fancy packaging or the celebrity endorsement is really coming from the cost of the ingredients, because these ingredients, I must add that natural ingredients are extremely, extremely expensive. And I'll give you an example. For example, if you use, let's say, just a simple thing like virgin coconut oil or virgin sesame oil versus using paraffin, even on mass scale, you'll be able to buy it for about, the virgin coconut oil, you'll be able to buy it for anywhere between 300 to 500 rupees a liter, nothing less than that. Even if you go to your kachi ghani and get it extracted there. But paraffin is not more than 70 rupees a liter. Or a natural extract, if you really see sandalwood instead, in fact, because that's one of the most adulterated ingredients. And why? Because when I say adulterated, it means it's been replaced by chemical molecule. Sandalwood oil is available for 3 lakh rupees a liter, a pure sandalwood oil. Of course, these days there are proclamations of sandalwood oil when they have had much lesser concentration of the pure sandalwood oil and it's mixed with a carrier oil of, like, let's say sesame or something else. And then you have, the equivalent of that, which is called santal, which sounds natural, quite natural, but is a chemical ingredient. So it's very important to look for what is 100% natural and where there are no mineral oils. And of course, there's another aspect of the shelf life. If you look for low shelf life, actually, it might mean that there are fewer preservatives. Then do look for baby, things which are good for babies or pregnant women, because those are the ones which are the most regulated, even more regulated than other products. So the cost per ml, which is, typically when we buy on sites like Amazon, they'll have a comparison of cost per ml. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to gauge, because if the filler is a large amount of water, then it doesn't really talk about how much it is, right? Because you're only seeing, as I showed you in that list of ingredients, it just gives you in descending order. It never gives you the percentages. But now that we know that a moisturizer is at least 60% to 80% of water, you obviously know that there is very little of other substance. So what are you really paying for? And what are these kind of ingredients that are there? Are they natural or are they synthetic? What are the concentrations? And therefore, you need to look at this cost per ml. Very often, if it's at the lowest level, might lead to a much higher lifetime cost. So you must actually look at what is the cost per use rather than the cost per ml. And, and I cannot belabor upon this, strongly enough, especially on a platform like this, that you should know your power as a consumer. You should always share feedback. Ask the questions. If you don't know what percentage it is, please ask on Amazon itself, or ask the manufacturer directly, or whichever other website you're buying on. And the companies will be forced to give answers. So find out. Don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to share, because I guess, in my case, the case was a very strong enough case for me to really delve down and do a lot of research. But sometimes you might not have this as your priority, but you can definitely ask that question. And the moment you share it, at least somebody else might get to know. And most importantly, please do get to know the brands better, because what has been the genesis? Because, for instance, I talked about the cream right at the beginning of the presentation. It started out as a wellness brand 150 years ago. Somewhere down the line, it got taken over by a multinational, or it became a multinational, and they decided to move away from wellness and move only to cosmetics. And this is something which only if you find out, start understanding, because there's a plethora of brands. And how do you understand this in this whole market space? And it's everybody's right to come out and bring a brand. So you need to understand a little more. What is Genesis? What are the reviews? And how is the philosophy, and how are they implementing it? And last but not the least, please focus on the 80-20 rule. We might know about even organic. Let's take the case of foods. We know this has got chemicals, we know that, but focus on the staples. Your staples are your daily moisturizer, your daily sunscreen, your aftershaves. These are your daily stuff, what you use around the year. It doesn't matter if a little bit, unless it's something which is seriously problematic, like lead in stay-on lipsticks. But unless you're using a lipstick every single day, you need to worry about it. If you're using it once in a blue moon, it doesn't really matter, does it? I think it's a big thank you to you as listeners, to Moneylife Foundation, because of all the kind of stuff that is, that they're trying to share to make consumers aware. It's extremely important. There is so much which is there. You can decide to be oblivious and say, what, I want to be like the ostrich with my head under the sand. Or you can even decide that let's come to the bridge when we cross it. We'll look at it. Let's just flirt with nature. And you can decide to be aware. So it's very important. Please make these conscious choices. The answer is in your hands. Thank you so much. And thank you once again to Moneylife Foundation to move on. We can take, questions from here.
Thank you so much, Geeta. I think that was a wonderful presentation. And I myself have learned a lot from you and from interacting with you, not just today, but even earlier. A couple of things that I thought we could start this discussion off by discussing. Okay, one of the things that, I know that you make the Parama oils, and one of the things that you see forever in all the advertising is oil is equal to chip chip, right? So there is a sort of mental barrier that's been created to using oils. And I remember you mentioned about, emulsifying it and using wet hands. Would you like to talk a little about that? Because, the whole chip chip business itself is a myth, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I myself was one of the people who do not want chip chip. In fact, that's the reason why I started my daughter moving on from, Pele, she was born in winter, so I had mustard oil, which was tradition in North India and Bengal in these areas. And then the moment winter moved on, I moved to these kind of oils, the other lighter oils. And then I wanted to move to a baby oil, which was very light. So this whole thing, which is there in my mind, and not just in my mind, it's there in everybody's mind, that it's chip chip. Because most oils are chip chip. I will not deny that. But a combination of oils at the right time, at the right dosage, can make sure that it's not chip chip. As I said, it's extremely important to be able to use it. If you mix it, as I said, with water, straight away it will be useful. Now, the traditional ways of using the chip chip oils was you applied the oil, and after leaving it to soak in for about half an hour, you actually had a bath. But in today's job, when I'm trying to, attend to a phone call, make my breakfast, finish my bath, I'm getting ready to go to work. Do I have that kind of time? I don't. In fact, forget about going to work. Do even most homemakers have that time? Do even men have that time? They just want a quick splash on and move on. Even if you have the time, it might not be your priority. So how do you move away with the chip chip? So as I said, the emulsification, we are trying to emulsify it on your hands or on your body the moment you apply a few drops. And all it takes, as I said, look at this, there's 5 to 10% oil and there is 70 to 80% water, right? So all you need is probably a few drops, which are enough probably on your whole body. They're at least giving the same benefit as a moisturizer. Now, what happens is that depending on the amount of oil that you use, depending on the kind of oil you use, it'll either get absorbed very fast, like coconut oil, it looks chip chip, but it actually gets absorbed very fast. So we don't advise coconut oil for long duration hydration. On the other hand, the mixture of sesame oil and almond oil stay on for much longer. So we use that for moisturizing for longer duration. But as I said, during winter right now, you can actually apply just oil and you won't feel chip chip because the skin is so dry, it'll just absorb everything. The other way to do it is if you apply oil after a warm water bath, your pores are large, they quickly absorb the oil and it goes inside. And the beauty about these oils is that it's not just an oil for moisturizing. Our cold pressed oils are filled with natural antioxidants. They have vitamin A, they have vitamin B, vitamin D, vitamin E, you name it. And these are the ingredients which are today being talked out on product labels. They'll say vitamin E enhanced, like a wheat germ oil or something. But these are there naturally in our products. It's there in almond oil or something. But you can't use just one oil because each oil has different penetration properties, as I said. Each oil acts on a different skin layer because based on the size of the molecule, the viscosity, it will penetrate to different levels. So I don't know whether I've answered your question, but yes, based on the difference of, so you can actually, in fact, go home today and try this experiment out yourself, or tomorrow morning after your bath with just your food oil, which you use in the kitchen. Because that is what, that is one of the main things that we look at is since the skin is absorbing everything, it's very important to look at food grade in the oils that you're using. In fact, let alone for eating, but so is it for here. So don't have solvent extracted oils, for instance. Use virgin cold pressed, use cold pressed, kachi ghani, lakdi ghani, whatever they call it.
So, Geeta, you have worked extensively with turmeric oil as well as a lot of ginger. I think Vinita Deshmukh, who is our consulting editor, has a question on inhalers. I don't know whether that would be part of it, but Vinita, you want to go ahead and ask?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, good evening. By the way, your presentation was so relevant and beautiful. And you mentioned in your talk that some products also cause inflammation of the blood vessels. So this is actually a personal question that my son, who's in California, he's been using these nasal sprays in the last 5 years, and he's actually got inflammation of the blood vessels. So do you think that is there any connection, and is there any of your products that could help him, or anything in nature?
Okay,
Sorry
so
to
we
ask a
can,
personal one.
no problem at all. Because see, I really honestly believe that it's very important for sharing this, because one doesn't know what triggers somebody else. It might be useful. So while I'm not a total authority on this, but I also know that because my daughter had asthma and we've had experiences. So please disregard this as me not being an expert in chemicals, but because of my experience with my daughter and her nebulizers and inhalers, right? So what we found is that even in an inhaler, there are, see, because the pathway of action, what gets into your body is either through the mouth or through the skin or through the lungs, whatever we inhale, right? And these active molecules need something which is a carrier to take it through. Typically in asthma or in some of the bronchial problems, there is a constriction of the bronchioles. For that constriction to get opened up, they need to inject in something which is a vasodilator. For those vasodilators could be natural or they could be chemical. The vasodilators in natural terms could be, what should I say? Like, for example, cinnamon is a vasodilator. It'll open up, it'll make the blood thinner, it'll open up the cavities better. On the other hand, something, let's say vitamin K, which is there in cabbage and broccoli, are actually vasoconstrictors. So it is, these are now, as I mentioned, these are the natural ones. Now they have to carry in through your lungs. Now, when you put them again through to carry this, there are, in fact, even in natural ingredients, there is a certain level to which it needs to get exposed. You cannot have, if you have an overdose of one of these also, it can cause a problem. So when you're constantly using it, because you're obviously facing a situation, a life situation, which requires you to use it very frequently. If you need to use it very frequently, what we did in the case of our daughter, for instance, we started moving to chest rubs. When some of the natural ingredients were percolating up, and aromatherapy will tell you that, will go in through natural means without there being a carrier which is forcing you to do it. But it, of course, depends on the severity of the situation. So all this should be done under guidance, and I'm happy to connect with you offline, Vinita, to get into more details about this, because I wouldn't like to comment without this. So what we found in our daughter's case, when we would give her some foods which would actually vasodilate to bring down her asthma, she would actually have a nosebleed. So we had to counter it with other foods and herbs to actually to manage that part. So it was a fine balancing act. And the same thing will happen in drugs. So for instance, when you have a diclofenac or some painkiller or ibuprofen, there will always be an antacid, or with some of the antibiotics, they will give you an antacid to counter the effect of the high intensity of the effect that it's going to do in your body, right?
Thanks, Geeta. A couple of questions that have been asked here in the chat, I think, are a little basic. I don't know if you want to quickly run through them, but somebody wants to know what is cold pressed or kachi ghani, and Azmin Kasat, who's a lawyer and is an activist for fair advertising, has an important point to make, which is, how do you know what is pure and what is not? Can we trust the labels, for instance? Because she points out that she purchased Bajaj almond oil and discovered that there's a lot of mineral oil in it and very little almond. You mentioned that in your talk. So would you like to, and a third one, which is sort of associated, is how good or bad is petroleum jelly? Because it's a base for a whole bunch of products. So, including homeopaths sometimes use petroleum jelly as a base for their ointments. Would you like to comment on these three?
Okay, so let's take one by one. What's cold pressed is basically, the traditional way of extraction, which was you're actually physically pressing it. It's an oil bearing nut or a seed, and you are pressing it physically. You try this experiment. If you buy an almond, you press it, or a peanut, you press it, and you'll find an oily layer. So the same thing is done in a much larger way. They press it and they take out the oil. And so therefore, cold pressed oils, if you really find, will happen more in typical oil seeds. So sesame, almond, walnut, apricot kernel, coconut, of course, mustard. These are the traditional oils which were there. Kokum butter, which is mildly heated and then extracted from. But the traditional ways that we were, used to eating these oils, and most of the other oils which are today extracted, many of the oils actually have a solvent to pass through that. So even in this cold pressed oils, you can have called solvent extracted coconut oil. Why? Because when you extract it cold pressed, there's only that much oil which will come out, but then there is still some oil which is left behind in the substrate. And to extract that balance, so you probably are familiar with these words in olive oil. So you'll have extra virgin cold pressed, virgin cold pressed, or extra virgin olive oil, virgin. Then there is olein. So there are different variations, and those are typically extracted using solvents. Sorry, and coming back to your question about petroleum jelly. So petroleum jelly actually in some ways is quite an inert substance. If I look at it, in many ways, it's not as harmful as many of the solvent extracted products because it's a reasonably inert medium. So if you apply it on your skin, sometimes it allows the body to heal itself. But the problem that happens with petroleum jelly is it can go into your pores, and we have our pores, and it'll go there and can lead to folliculitis. So therefore, if you use it on parts which don't have pores, like the feet or the ankles, some parts of you, it's probably not that bad. But you have to also see what else goes into it, because they'll never give you a plain petroleum jelly, right? There will be a perfume, or there will be something else to even emulsify it for that matter. So if it's a genuine thing, now, if it's a medicine and you're applying it for a temporary reason and it's under the guidance of a doctor, it's probably not a bad thing because they are checking it out.
What about labels? What's your experience? Are they honest in India? I mean, when they say that it's a pure product, or if they have a mineral oil, do all of them mention it? Or is that something one needs to worry about as well?
Okay, so here's the thing. What we realize is there are two different types of labels. In some cases, they allow you to mention just the key ingredients. And very often, what get termed as medicated products come under that zone. They don't have to have the 100% of the label mentioned. So they'll mention the active ingredient, and then as I said, they mention excipient or gel base or oil base. And what goes into that, one doesn't know. Secondly, what is pure? It can be a pure chemical. I mean, so what do you mean by pure? I mean, these are the experiences as a consumer, and these are experiences that I'm having, or dilemmas which I'm having when I'm writing out my labels, because I'm also faced with this problem that I want to lure customers, right? I have to compete, even though I'm in the space, I have to compete against the mainstream cosmetic companies. And so how do you say that? So is it pure natural? Is it just pure? It could be just, suppose I have citric acid, it's pure citric acid. It's not adulterated citric acid. It's pure. So what do we mean by pure? So it is important to, I think it's very important to read between the lines. And I said, to the extent possible that you can look at going 100% natural, going back to your kitchen, seeing what is possible, it's great. Of course, we don't have that time, but go by reviews, try to see, ask questions. I also don't have the answers for this.
All right. So out of all the chemicals, this jumble of chemicals that you showed us in your slides, What are the ones, if you had to identify 3 or 4 as the most dangerous for you, that should raise a red flag when you look at it? What would you say those were?
So as I said, the first one is, of course, keeping aside water a bit. Okay. So then parabens are definitely something which are now a known chemical, and they should be looked at, searched for and found out. There are phthalates. Very often phthalates are not known as that. And so there are, different terminologies. If we can, let me just look for that slide. And they very often have abbreviations which will tell you what it is. It'll have BBP, BB. So it's just confusing, and it's like it's not just confusology, it's obfuscology. I think I don't know. They've, I think, figured out how to obfuscate as much as they tell. So there are words like BBP, DBP, DEP, DIDP. If you ask me, this is a real killer because they affect the reproductive system, and it's just there everywhere. It's there in fragrances, it's there in lotions, because everything we wanted to smell nice. And so very often I tell people, don't necessarily need to put something that's necessarily smelling nice on your skin. Use your perfume. It's okay. You can divide that. The second one is what they call as formaldehyde releases, and they use urea very often, which is as a preservative in products, and anything which has water in it. And it is actually quite a carcinogen. It's an allergen. The parabens I talked about, and the retinoids, because today as longevity is increasing, we're all looking and wanting to look younger because we are there on screens. Now today, for instance, I would like to look my best if I'm here, right? If I'm today, we're no longer retiring at age 60. We're continuing to work 70, 80, 90 till we drop dead maybe. Even if we are 60, we don't really want to look old because, it's how you are about yourself. So retinol palmitate or retinoic acid is again a big problem because it's there today in a lot of the products. So if I were to choose, these are the 4 big problems, and I'm only right now covering skincare. Okay, I'm not getting into hair dye. I'm not getting into lipsticks or color cosmetics here.
Okay, so for food products, there is a convention that the ingredient that's the maximum is listed up front and the smaller ingredients are later. Now, is that the same with cosmetics? And so, should we look for things like, if they say turmeric or something that's natural, should we, if I don't want to become a chemist and an expert just because I want to choose a bottle off the shelf, is it enough if I look at when they say natural, it should not be among the last 4 or 3 ingredients in that jumble, and it should be high up? How does one sort of choose it? What is the protocol for listing ingredients? And again, in cosmetics, I'm sure water or the base oil would be the first ingredient because that will be the maximum, right? So you can't look at it like you're looking at food products. So how would you suggest we do it?
So I'm not so sure you're going to like this answer, but so if let's take the case of turmeric itself, because that's there in my products, right? Even if I have turmeric, let's say I have 20 different oils and my turmeric. For turmeric to be effective, let's say I'm talking about it, actually, I don't need it to be more than 1 to 2%. If that is the case, it's almost always going to be at the bottom of my chart, irrespective of what I do. Because if I have turmeric more than that, I'm talking about a turmeric extract. If it's turmeric powder, it can probably be 100% turmeric powder. But the moment I'm looking at it as a turmeric extract, then if it becomes too much like an essential oil, you cannot have more than that on a regular basis unless it is very therapeutic. So it will be at the bottom of the chart. Now that is a natural ingredient, but if you need to have, but we don't know, as I said, the label FDA says that the products need to be in descending order till you hit 1%. till you hit the level when a product is not more than 1%, an ingredient is not more than 1% of your final product, right? So if let's say you have 20 products, 20 ingredients in your product, each ingredient cannot be more than 5%, right? Each ingredient cannot be more, your fifth, that it's, I'm like getting a little confused with the math, but basically till it hits 1%, and most products will have large number of ingredients. So till then it will be there, and beyond, when it's lesser than 1%, it can be in any order. So if it is less than 1%, let's say turmeric is less than 1%, and let's say there's another ingredient, ginger, which is also less than 1%, but let's say one is 0.9% and one is 0.5%, I have the liberty to bring one upfront or one lesser upfront. So I don't have the right answer. I mean, for these, very often there are tests which will go in to check out through the GCs or through the HPLCs to figure out what is the percentage.
Okay. I think Yogesh has a question from YouTube. Yogesh, you want to ask it?
Sure. The question is about how about lauryl sulfates that is used in shampoos. And one more question is there about the packaging, the material or packaging material used for cosmetics. So should people be careful about that?
Sulfates, yes, are. So today I was focusing much more on the leave-on cosmetics, and there are a lot of problems in the wash off chemicals, but by and large, the problems are not as bad as, it will probably just affect the pH balance more often than not, as long as you wash them off. Conditioners are a problem because you kind of leave them on, or serums, which you might even rinse off. Hair dyes, there are some very important things. So yes, do avoid at least the known problems. You say, okay, sulfates free, but as I told you, it is, the person who's the safe buyer, you just look for the obvious ones and at least tick back those. Now, beyond that, there is a whole, as I said, under the bell curve, there is so much. Now, for example, I'll give you an example since we're talking about shampoos. And this was a study that we did in soaps. So I can definitely tell you in soaps. So in soap, suppose you take a soap bar and you take one brand that you can go home and check this out yourself. You take a soap bar of one brand, and at the same time, you see the hand wash, liquid hand wash of the same brand with the same colors and the same label, right? What you will find is that the number of chemicals suddenly goes up exponentially. Why? Again, because now you're mixing water. You're mixing water with a soap. Therefore, you now need stabilization. You need emulsification. You need preservation. Because a soap bar can be there for so long. Can a hand wash? If you keep your hand wash after some time, you will start seeing that the thick settles down and there's a watery level on top. So the same thing happens with shampoo. You do a shampoo bar versus a liquid shampoo. And in fact, when we were young, we had, when we were, the previous generation, they used the Amla and the Rita and the Shikakai, which today we don't like to use. We think that we want that, nice, luscious hair. So we think that, but you can actually, believe it or not, get it back with the same powders if you're just willing to spend that little time extra. But coming back to this, you can probably replace a shampoo bar with shampoo. In a shampoo, for instance, you need to now bring back the pH balance because a soap will be alkaline. A shampoo, they say pH balanced. So what have they added? They have added now an acid level to it. So you can, again, what you can do is you can de-link the two. You can add your own acid through a lemon, through some apple cider vinegar, through whatever, and just add your own. So if you're adding shampoo bar, you add your acid outside. If you are doing with a powder, it doesn't matter because a powder is pH balanced. So I don't know whether I've answered or confused you more, but yeah, these are some of the experiments which I've been doing on myself and all my experiments are with myself and my daughter first, and then we looking beyond, but these are what our experiences have been.
What about the packaging? packaging material used for cosmetic.
So that's another different ball game altogether. So yes, so packaging, yes. I mean, we talk about the kinds of plastics. Ideally, it should be glass because it's inert. Second, you could have metals. Third, but both of these, like glass, if you see, most people don't prefer glass, even though, even as an environmentally conscious person, you say, I want to do away with plastic. I want glass. But we've had customers coming back, please give us in plastic, because when we keep it in the bathroom and it falls down and breaks, it becomes a problem. So what do we do about that? We've had serious requests from senior citizens. People, especially when you're using something in the bathroom, it becomes an even bigger problem. So, secondly, the packaging cost increases. So getting into food grade plastic is another thing. So you can probably use food grade plastic, make sure that it's recycled, make sure that it's not leaching into the product that you have.
Okay. We have a last question from S. Sada, who wants to ask it personally. I'm going to ask them to unmute.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for this presentation. And I'm manufacturer of cosmetics. I manufacture both natural line as well as this conventional line. And I really thanks to make aware people on this. I'm sorry, I was running. I was carrying my laptop in my hand. But yeah, thank you very much for this presentation. Yep.
You want to ask your question quickly? Do you have a question?
No.
You just want to thank her. Yeah? Well, that's nice to have a compliment from someone who's actually making cosmetics himself. I think we've had a wonderful session. Does anyone have a last question? There is some advice I see in the chat about diluting shampoos
I
and
will just ask a last question quickly.
Sure, please.
Normally, Geeta ma'am, in our tradition, we do that Abhyanga Snan, where you put oil on your body and then go to the bath, take a hot water bath. So, but you are telling that you can apply the oil and water mixture after the bath. So, which is the better way? Abhyanga Snan or after bath?
So the ideal really is Abhyanga Snan, because that's our tradition. Most of these Abhyanga Snans were done, with herbs which are boiled in oil, and then they were applied on the skin, and then you waited and you washed off. But here is the cut to present. Why were so most of those oils, as I said, they were herb infused, and to extract from the herbs the core essential active ingredients from the herbs, you needed to boil the herbs in the oil for 20 hours, 30 hours, 2 days, 3 days, maybe sometimes even a month. Okay. So this was the tradition. Now cut to present, what happens? Typically, when you boil, now let's say you're constantly boiling in oil, and this, you can go back home and probably when you make your puris, you'll find the oil thickens. So this oil very often is a thick oil, and therefore it's sticky. So it may be the ideal thing, but what happens is that in our pursuit for the ideal, sometimes we miss not doing anything, which is so, and this is what used to happen to me. I mean, I would want to go to a spa, but someday I will go to the spa and get myself an Ayurvedic massage, right? But even if you're very committed, you might not do this more than once a week. If you're very committed, if you're not so committed, once a month, you're definitely not committed once a year, or sometimes very often never. And very often you realize this only maybe in the latter part of your life कि अभी मुझे वहां पर आयुर्वेदिक स्नान करना है, शिरोधारा करना है, I want to do all that. What happens? By that time, it's very often too late. By the time you discover this. So if you're in a traditional family and you've grown up every single day abhyanga karte hain, and that is part of your routine or dinacharya, and there is no getting out of it, it's wonderful. That is the best way. Now, what is it that cut to present? What are we trying to do? The cold pressed oils are actually more easy to absorb. They're not thickened. But we need to still have the herb infusions. So how are we extracting the herbs? Instead of boiling it in oil, we are using a technology called carbon dioxide, supercritical carbon dioxide extraction method. So carbon dioxide, which is actually an inert atmospheric ingredient, is pumped at very high pressure into the turmeric, for instance. That comes out, it's equivalent of actually having, because what comes out is the lipophilic fraction, the same thing that happens when you're boiling the ingredient in oil for that long. So that same thing, instead of, you've only adopted a modern technology to get the same thing out. This is not the same as extracting an individual molecule. It is taking out a herbal extract, but just using a modern methodology and then mixing it. So your oil is now not a thick oil, but a thin oil, right? So this thin oil can percolate in and you can apply it post your bath. What we're trying to do is, can we move people from a particular habit? See, because again, when it comes to changing habits, when it's a small habit that you're looking at changing, you're using an existing, behavior and then changing it to your adapting a better option for that. And building it in, it's probably something which can stick. So here we come to the second part in terms of your question, which is better. So this is, it's good. It's as good. I won't say it is better or worse. Abhyanga Snan is very good. This is also very good. Okay. So if somebody tells you this is not traditional, Abhyanga Snan is what, you can do Abhyanga Snan with the same oil. You'll actually have the same benefits. Okay. The second thing is that this was a practical feedback by senior citizens. We had somebody talked about a gingiber oil. We have a ginger-based oil, okay? A ginger with turmeric, and it's in a base of sesame oil, which is used for stiffness and pain relief, and people who are runners and go to the gym, or even for things like menstrual cramp. The problem is, so the good part of this is that people who have chronic problems or who need to use it on a daily basis, instead of using either sticky oils, when after that old lady actually told us and that she had to sit in her gown, she was worried about walking because her legs were sticky, slippery, she could use it after that. So it made sure that she could use this instead of that oil, and it was beneficial. So using a traditional oil to this was working out for her. The second thing was that replacing the same thing could also replace a chemical ingredient, where if on a daily basis you need to apply, for example, we have people who are professional players, badminton players, who on a daily basis after their play need to spray themselves with stiffness relief spray. And it said two things. One is that the worry, the smell that you're constantly smelling of that. The second one was, the more thing is that when you're constantly using it on a regular basis, especially when you have arthritic pains or stiffness like this, you're using those chemicals which are percolating inside. And if it's a diclofenac or, methyl salicyate or something else which is going into your body and can cause long-term damage to organs, that is when there is a problem. So there is that much of, issues regarding even the Abhyanga oils, that if you can use this way of doing it, it's much better.
Thank you.
Because it's not against an ideal. Most of things in life is what is the best alternative to what is available, rather than compared to what is ideal, because it's very difficult to reach that ideal.
Thank you so much, Geeta. This has been a wonderful, enlightening presentation and a great learning experience. I think people want to know whether your presentation is going to be available. Yes, it's available even right now. As soon as you go out of this program, you can find it on YouTube, and it will be available on the Moneylife Foundation website. If you need to contact Geeta, you can write to foundation@Moneylife, and we will send you her contact details. And if you like to look at what she does, go and look up the website of Parama Naturals. So thank you again, Geeta. This was very useful, and I personally use your products and I've found them wonderful, which is why I thought a lot of others need to hear and possibly learn. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you once again, Sucheta, to you and the entire team, to you especially, because it takes a lot for somebody who is so committed to increasing consumer awareness, for you to bring out into the open space, knowledge like this. And especially when it comes from, and I'm especially indebted because, sometimes you're constantly, especially you as a journalist, will be worried that, will people think that you have something at stake here? What are you getting out of this? There is so much vested interest that people have today that even as journalists, you have to be so careful. And, it's really my heartfelt thanks to you for keeping that worry aside and, bringing out the genuine stories and creating a platform where it's important for most of people to get, in fact, for instance, I thought I'll just write blogs and not do all of this, get into a business at the ripe old age, because I'd never thought about doing business in my life. But when I realized that I knew so much, but where are the options? I might know it, but do I have a solution? How do I find the solution? And it's so difficult to find them. And well, that's what made me start the business in the first place. But thank you so much to you. Namaste. Big thanks to you and Yogesh and Debashish and Akshay.